Christian values. I'm going to leave the bloke's name out that I mentioned here, but he wrote that the Bible is full of well-documented contradictions and states it is the retelling of earlier legends. Because it is. It is very easy to make assertions. It is quite another thing to substantiate them. Yeah, David, it is. That's kind of the problem people have with religion. So it's highly hypocritical, highly ridiculous that you're going to demand that people aren't substantiating their assertions when you're someone who believes in talking donkeys. Exactly which parts of the Bible were written hundreds of years after the events? Modernists allege Daniel's prophecy was written long after he died. They did not and cannot prove any such thing. Most historians, including Christian historians, accept that those parts of the Gospel were written quite a while after the events in them supposedly happened. This is a non-issue that you're arguing here, David. This is ridiculous. We do know they were written quite a while after. When you say they did not and cannot prove any such thing, yeah, they can, really. The burden of proof really lies with you to prove that they're wrong, not the other way around. And here is the absolute brilliant bit. Marriage between one man and one woman is God ordained. There is no higher authority. Departure from this will destroy society. Let's just look at that for a minute. Destroy society. I mean, do you want to... Could you be any more ridiculous, David? Do you think it's going to destroy society? Not that it's just going to upset a few miserable conservative simpletons such as yourself, but it's actually going to destroy society. No, this is the changing of the meaning of a word, really, isn't it? Now, we survived the changing of the word gay, the changing of the meaning of the word gay. That used to mean something else, and now it means something different. And you know, we've survived that pretty well. No kind of apocalypse, no descent into anarchy. I think we'll probably survive these very slight, much more slight change in the meaning of the word marriage. We go on. Already anarchy is spreading in society. Anarchy, for crying out loud. I read in a national newspaper that children are starting school still in nappies, barely able to walk because their mothers plonk them in their pushchairs in front of the television. The children communicate in grunts because nobody bothers to talk to them. I'm pretty sure I read that article as well. The national newspaper there, which you're putting your faith in completely, was the Telegraph. The Telegraph, I think it was the Telegraph, either that or the Daily Mail, one of these rags that, quite frankly, barely qualifies as a newspaper, and really just tries to play up to people, such as, you know, conservative nut jobs such as yourself, David. So anyway, this isn't anarchy. This is just. But if these things are true, it's not an example of anarchy. It's an example of sloppy parenting. That's really all it is. It was the preaching and teaching of biblical precepts that brought this and other countries out of ignorance and superstition. No, David, it's what's kept these countries in ignorance and superstition. Any progress we've made away from ignorance and superstition has been against this brick wall of religion that people like you are a part of. You're another brick in the wall, as Big Floyd would say. Where are we? The rule of law was based broadly on the Mosaic law. Society and manners were reformed. Family life was at the heart of the nation's well-being. Not according to... These aren't biblical values. Jesus actually said people who want to be his followers have to hate their father and mother. You know what I mean? This is... I don't really like this idea of the Bible being... And this was in the New Testament, let's not forget. That's not... You can't do this whole appealing to the Old... that was the Old Testament and now it's the New Testament. You know, I really don't like this idea of the Bible being put forward to us as an example of family values. I really don't, considering it contains that. Also contains commands that say you should stone unruly children to death. Now, I mean... I know you've got a problem with kids wearing nappies and not being able to talk, you know, communicate properly or whatever, but let's face it, stoning them to death is not going to be the answer, is it? Since the 1960s, morality has broken down and we have become broken Britain. If we destroy the institution of marriage as it was meant to be, things can only get worse. Yeah, well, that's because the 1960s created all these evil things like rock and roll. You know, that's obviously what the problem is. Mr. Kirk made the astounding claim, the world is a lot less frightening place now because education and knowledge has replaced the need for gods. Really? I was in the RAF when the Cuban Missile Crisis was taking place. Our bombers were at the end of the runway, loaded with hydrogen bombs, manned around the clock, and ready to be airborne in 3 minutes. That was quite a while ago. We lived under the shadow of the mushroom cloud for decades, and that has not gone away as other nations have got or on the point of obtaining nuclear devices. Here, you're actually missing a point. Excuse me while I drink. Everyone having nuclear weapons actually is a deterrent for everyone not to use them. It's a reason for, if that's the right word, a reason for them to not use nuclear weapons, because you know as soon as you've launched your nuclear weapons at another country, they're going to launch theirs, and everyone's going to be dead. So that's why no one uses them. So everyone, as long as everyone has nuclear weapons, we don't need to be too worried about them actually using them. So I don't think we nowadays can be really compared to the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, we're a lot. We've moved on quite far from there. You know, we're not ducking and covering or anything similar. What about the awful atrocities taking place in several areas of the world today? Okay, what about the tens of millions massacred by atheistic regimes in the last century? The term atheistic regime is one I get very sick of hearing. It should really be in inverted commas if you ever use it. Atheism has a meaning, and it means either one of two things. It means you either believe there are no gods, or you lack a belief in gods, the latter being the more passive form of it. Those are the only real two meanings that I think are accurate. Only two definitions that are accurate. Atheism isn't a moral philosophy of any kind. It's not a moral philosophy that these people like Stalin or Pol Pot or whatever were following. They just weren't following things like Christianity, or they weren't following things like Islam, or following things like Buddhism. They weren't doing that. They just happened to lack a certain quality. These are not atheist. Atheism wasn't really at the core of these ideas, more that the distaste they had for religion because it drew attention away from them. They wanted the allegiance of the state, and they just saw religion as something that took that allegiance away. So it's very wrong to try and lump everyone into atheism. Atheism is not any kind of moral philosophy. We do have certain moral philosophies that are atheistic in nature, things like secular humanism, but people like Stalin or Pol Pot were certainly not secular humanists. So it's very wrong, it's very misleading to just try and lump everyone in to the same category. Even if atheism were some kind of philosophy, I still think it would be wrong to do this. You know, I still think it's wrong to lump all Christians into the same bracket. I don't think that's right either, and that actually is, you know, a doctrine, a thing that should be uniting people. It has certain morals and certain rules. What about the tens of thousands incarcerated in North Korea? Same point. What about the estimated 40 million babies worldwide every year? Well, I think what the person writing this letter originally was talking about was the Western world. Obviously, they're saying we do live in a less frightening world. Even if you are one of these poor people who's suffering in the third world nowadays, there is at least some glimmer of hope for you. You know, there is such thing as foreign aid. We do have charities that can help. Are they going to help everyone? No, they're not going to manage that, sadly. But it's still better than when everyone was like that. Everyone was struggling to survive. No one had access to medicine or anything like that at all. It is still better. What about those who are left to die of neglect in our hospitals and care homes? Again, that's true, a good point, although I would say that number is increasingly less than it was. And bear in mind there's a lot more of us than there were back then, so it's increasingly less than it was. And we can at least do something to help people like that. We're not as stuck as we were once. We didn't have anything, but you know, we could just pray. That's one of the reasons why religion has become less and less, because we can actually have actual proper solutions to these problems rather than just sitting there praying to something, hoping something will solve the problem. We actually are a bit better at solving them ourselves because we have more knowledge. So this is the point this original gentleman has made here, is that we do. That's why he means what he says. So that's what he means when he says that education has replaced the need for gods. That's what he's talking about. Less frightening indeed. How odd is it that a Conservative Prime Minister is pushing this through Parliament with the backing of the member for Chester, Stephen Mosley? Instead of conserving traditional and Christian values which have stood the nation in good stead, we have the Conservative Party destroying these very values against the wishes of thousands of their rank and file members who are leaving in droves. Well, I can't really be that sympathetic, David. You are surprised that a politician is lying to you, has lied to you, or has gone back on their word. I suppose he hasn't really lied, he's gone back on his word. You're surprised that that's the thing with Conservatives. They do actually make progress. They just do it behind everyone else. They're just sort of lagging behind everyone else. So eventually they do embrace all these attitudes coming from progressives, but they do it so reluctantly that they're doing it about 10 years behind everyone else. So it's not really that odd that Tories are doing this. It's the only way they're going to stay in power. If they weren't willing to give on this, I just don't think they'd make any progress. In fact, even with the Labour Party being as popular as it is at the moment, I still don't think Conservatives would make much headway with this. So no, it's not really that odd. I can understand why you think it's odd on the surface of it, but... So I was hoping to stop talking about this kind of thing, but just mentioning of destruction of society, I just think these things are so bloody ridiculous, and the hypocrisy of demanding that people substantiate these views when these are well substantiated views. If you did your own homework, you could figure these things out for yourself. Anyway, that's just a bit more from the local fish wrapper. I'd like to think this whole issue was going to die down, but I don't think it's particularly likely to happen anytime soon. Goodbye.